Incisionless brain surgery is like by itself an eye-catching thing, but the fact that you'll see patients with these really severe tremors going, it's practically changed like within a matter of an hour or so.
Insightec is really just at this incredible moment in time where there's a lot of great things happening with acoustic energy, and neurosurgery is really at the tip of the spear for what we're looking to accomplish.
Insightec in my eyes is one of those like moonshot projects. It wasn't like a little iteration on something.
Think about what we're doing at Insightec. We're delivering acoustic energy in the brain and burning a hole to solve a neurological condition and tackling Parkinson's and essential tremor movement disorders.
Do you feel like the reason why most people don't do that is because it feels less sophisticated?
You can't replace part of the brain. Like,
you treat them the same.
Source of truth for the MedTech industry.
Coexists with the puppets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the MedTech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high, a lot of things.
You stayed at MedTech
with your host, Omar Khateeb.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Let me give you a little intro on our guest today. As many of you guys know, the way I like to cover MedTech is very much like college sports or professional sports, that you have certain brands and players and people who are moving up within the industry that are going to sort of usher our industry into sort of a new era, right? And so there's only a handful of people like that. So today's guest, and I'm going to embarrass him right now by saying this, but it's very true. First got on my radar like a little over a year ago because some very well-respected big names in our industry told me like you need to have this guy on your radar. One, of course, is Maurice Ferre, the founder of Mako, founder of Insightec, right? Another one, Chris Dewey, the first founding board member of Mako. You guys know he's been on the show. Another gentleman who is very well known, not been on the show, still trying it. Probably not going to happen, but Jerry McNamara, who led worldwide sales over at Intuitive in the early days. And so I kept hearing this name, Jake Ghannam. And Jake and I got connected via cell. We've been texting. We've been trying to set this up. This episode's been like in the works, I think, for like 6 months now, just because of our schedules. But I'm glad to finally make it happen. And more importantly, introduce my audience to like another great like leader in our industry. So Jake, thanks for coming on the show. And then for those who are not aware, maybe give us a little bit of your current role and title and the company you're at. And then let's dive into like all things MedTech. So you have like a really wild story that I just want to dive into.
Thank you, Omar. And it's an absolute pleasure to be on here. Great group of people. I get the privilege and honor to lead at Insightec, the Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer for the organization. Basically lead the wing-to-wing business from our marketing organization to our sales operations, our CMO office, clinical affairs. So really the wing-to-wing business here scaling globally. And Insightec is really just at this incredible moment in time where there's a lot of great things happening with acoustic energy, and really where neurosurgery is just really at the tip of the spear for what we're looking to accomplish. Really exciting time at Insightec, and stoked to be here.
And I will say, and this is, I really mean this. I'm not just saying this as a compliment. Maurice loves it, but like, Insightec for me is like one of those companies in our industry where I love companies that make things look literally like magic. And for like how you guys solve tremor, literally like, incisionless brain surgery is like by itself, like an eye-catching thing. But the fact that like you'll see patients with these like really severe tremors going and it's practically change like within a matter of like an hour or so, it really highlights the magic of our industry. And more importantly, I think from an investor standpoint, talent standpoint, I think like, I'm wondering, your take on this. I feel like we have two existential crises happening in our industry. One is capital. We need to just bring in more capital, more investors into the industry and everything to fund like, the next Insightec, really big, Insightec in my eyes is one of those like moonshot projects, right? It wasn't like a little iteration on something. It's like a moonshot. And the other side is talent, so like the smartest people in the world that are coming out of Harvard, Stanford, or, some random area that's super talented, like they don't know about MedTech unless they're in it. Like I go down the street, I tell people either crypto or fintech or SaaS, they all know that. But when I say MedTech, for some reason, they always go to hospital beds. I don't know why that's the case. And so that's all to say, like, I appreciate you and the organization and what entities like that can do for our industry.
It really is incredible. And anyone who knows Maurice Ferre, the gentleman's a legend in the industry, a visionary, and really having an opportunity to partner with him and scale this organization across the globe has been honestly one of the most exciting moments in my career. Not only am I fortunate enough to have the platform to go make these decisions and guide us in the right direction, having somebody like that at the helm who sees around corners, who've done this, and really having an opportunity to bring such a disruptive technology to a market that otherwise wouldn't exist, and the profound impact that we can have on patients, getting them in an outpatient setting back to a normal functioning day-to-day life within an hour of being in an intraoperative MRI suite, having this procedure done. It's awesome. So yeah, I think, capital investment industry is wildly critical. Otherwise, we don't push boundaries and we don't have an opportunity to innovate at the way that Insightec has been pushing boundaries for quite some time now. So the exciting thing is I think we're really just at the very beginning of what's possible, and there's a lot of runway in front of us.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you, because I think it's very rare, and I think it'll be interesting to hear from you from this standpoint. For one, you have a really great history. You started off as a clinical specialist and you served all kinds of different roles, at strategics and everything. Now you're in the startup world. But in your position, we were talking off camera that essentially, like, as executive vice president, chief commercial officer, it sounds like the whole organization is essentially reporting to you. And so can you give us a walkthrough of, like, what are you overseeing at Insightec? And I think more importantly is that, how do you manage that, right? Because there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of details. And so, like, how do you manage the talent, the strategy, so that way you're not spread too thin, but essentially you serve as this, like, central source where all of these different areas are just piping into?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we have a tremendous leadership team at Insightec. Our ELT all the way down to ground level individual contributors in the organization are highly motivated, highly skilled, and absolutely are very efficient with the workload that we're asking them to do. From my lens, having an opportunity to touch virtually every piece of the business, it's really important that you can empower your leaders to make right decisions and to really be spending your time out of the noise and staying hyperly focused on the things that really move the needle. So for things like, my week to week, it's very intentional with our time. Our executive leadership team really divides and conquers well. We're an organization just under 500 employees. So having to be super disciplined when scaling a global organization like this really matters. So for me, again, it's, pick the 3 to 5 activities a week that I know are super critical for us to continue to move the ball forward. And, a lot of those decisions align in things like emerging markets. When we look outside the United States and we think about our clinical evidence generation needed to improve market access and expand reach for more patients. So do we have the right studies? Do we have the right KOL design? Do we have the right infrastructure in place that when we get these indications, we can launch at scale and move quickly into those markets to help patients? So that's one element. And then, voice to customer and really understanding the elements of how we impact our upstream and downstream elements of our product design and the evolution of that. We're very fortunate to have a great R&D and manufacturing team based out of Haifa and product team. So we're super efficient. But it's definitely something that requires you to stay super focused week in and week out and not tackle things that are low return of your time right now. So we've gotten pretty good at that.
Yeah, let me double click into that a little bit more. So something for those who are not watching, there's a quote behind you that I really like, which says, there's only one way to succeed in anything, and that is to give it everything. And I completely agree. When it comes to focus, right? How do you decide what it is, right? And how do you decide that you've actually given everything? How do you think about that? Whether it's, I think, like a clinical associate who's listening to, let's say, an executive C-suite level leader, like, how do you decide where to put your focus? And how do you decide, like, what everything essentially constitutes?
Well, first of all, thank you for acknowledging the quote. I love it. That's been something tried and true over 9 moves in the last 20 years of my career, taking every opportunity. That piece of steel has moved into every home office that I've had and carried with me, because I do believe in that mentality. So first of all, you have to be willing to put forth a certain amount of effort to achieve whatever your goals are. And I think, people ask, how do you balance the workload versus the capacity to do all the work and the timing? The reality is there's sacrifices, and it's at every level of the role. As a rep, I made sacrifices as, running trays across the state and taking calls in the middle of the night to make sure our physicians were taken care of and patients were treated appropriately and got the care and the devices that they needed. And then in this role, I did 200 plus days away, my first year in at Insightec. And yeah, it's a grind, but it's also a necessity in order to continue to push boundaries and reach more patients. So I think it's something you have to be wired for. I think it's a choice you make at any role. You have the ability to accelerate your own timetables and really achieve whatever you set out to, whatever your goals are. But I think having a clear defined purpose really matters. And I know that every role I've taken in my career, I've always laid out what the objectives were, what I hope to accomplish, who I can help along the way, and how I can give back to my teammates. And that's really yielded a lot of amazing opportunity in the last 20 years of my career.
If you're a CEO of a medtech company and you just got ghosted by another investor this week, or maybe a strategic that you're trying to have a meeting with just kind of brushed you off at a conference, and you're just sick and tired of all this, you want to make these people pretty much eat their words, right? I think I have something for you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most medtech startups don't fail because of product. And trust me, I can confidently say this after interviewing so many different startups on the show, investors, strategics. A lot of them fail because the market never really formed around them. My obsession with technology adoption and, more importantly, market engineering has sort of taken shape over the years into my business called MarketCraft and recruiting a top tier team around me for that. And MarketCraft, we're not just about digital marketing and campaigns and everything. We focus on engineering markets. We use AI trained models, psychology, persuasion, and strategic storytelling to manufacture something that every single CEO needs. And that's leverage. We want to give you leverage with the market. So by creating magnetic messaging and attention, we can shape a belief system that is going to attract and magnetize those early clinical adopters to you. We want to give you leverage with investors because when your category narrative is very clear and your demand signals are loud and you can show this early clinical pipeline, and then at that point, capital start to chase you instead of the other way around. Now you have options. And then leverage with strategics. Because look, when you show a strategic, and trust me, I've had many conversations with them on this podcast and offline. When you show them that you're starting to own momentum in a space that they care about, you don't just look like a startup to them anymore. Now you look more like a partner. And if you do it really well, potentially competition they need to take out, right? So if you're an early stage MedTech CEO and this all resonated with you, I want you to stop what you're doing, put pause on this podcast, go to growmymedtech.com. That's GROW, growmymedtech.com. I want you to book time with me. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of a market analysis for you. I'm going to come to the table with 2 to 3 really good ideas. You know, there's not a guarantee that you guys might be a fit for us. It could be the wrong time, a lot of things like that. We turn away more companies than we take on. But I can guarantee you that you're going to walk away with 2 or 3 really good ideas for free, and it's going to be a good conversation. So go to growmymedtech.com. I'm really looking forward to talking with you. And more importantly, you can feel free to vent to me about all the problems that you're having, because at MarketCraft, we want to come and solve those for you immediately. Now, let's get back to the episode. So let's go back a little bit in your career. I always like looking at people who have risen up in our industry as entrepreneurs and leaders and looking like, what was the very first thing this person was doing? So for you, you were a sales manager at Best Buy and then a senior manager at Costco, and this is well over 10 years ago now. But your first role was at UniFirst, is correct? Is that your first MedTech? Is UniFirst a MedTech company?
No, it's not. So I can walk you through that. It's actually
walk me through that, because the reason why I like to focus in on this is that a lot of times when it comes to leaders, there are certain values that you carry that were essentially either indoctrinated in you by yourself or by somebody else at a very early age. Like when, I don't know if do you have kids?
Yes, I have 2 kids, a son and a daughter.
Oh, same here. How old are your kids?
Well, my daughter's turning 13, so we're going to have a teenager in the house, which we're all wildly excited about. And then our son is turning 11 this year. So
nice.
2 athletes.
I'm in the thick of it. So my son is 3.5, and my daughter is 6 months old. But like with children, like you have to imprint on them key things at a very early age, and that sort of becomes their character later on in life, as long as they continue that. So what were some of those things that were imprinted on you during those years as like a salesperson in different industries, and how did that translate to your first gig in the space?
Yeah, I grew up in a very competitive environment. I have 3 older brothers that were all pretty successful Division I athletes, and a younger sister who was an incredible athlete. Neither of my parents went to college and had a college education, so I grew up working in their party store in Westland, Michigan, and was sweeping parking lots and stocking shelves and bagging ice. And I grew up at a young age knowing that you have to work hard. You have responsibility, and I've been on my own since 20 years old. So I'm actually very proud. And people always say, like, you put Best Buy and Costco out there on your resume, and you're this med tech, leader who's trying to pursue what your dreams are, and you're so damn proud about that. And I say, yeah, I am, because it's never too good to do any job, and you have to see an opportunity in anything you do. So for me, when I decided to go to school and put myself through, the type of opportunity that was out there was a sales manager. I was great at connecting with people. I loved speaking to people and selling things, and naturally landed a job at Best Buy as a sales manager. And then quickly realized about a little under 2 years that that wasn't the right environment for me. And there was this opportunity to join Costco. It was an emerging company. I was in retail. It was an opportunity to go into their leadership development program and move into a marketing function and a sales function. But after about 6 years of doing that, I realized I loved leading. I loved making an impact on a team. It really resonated with me. I just found it, always a servant-minded leadership. It was pleasing for me, but I just had no connection to the industry. And I started to pay really close attention to people who were in healthcare. I didn't want to be a physician. I thought maybe I would try to do that at one point, but I just didn't have that desire, and started meeting friends and family members of friends who were in the device world working at J&J and the Strykers, and was wildly intrigued. So I said, okay, how do I go do that job? And they said, hey, you got to go sell something. You got to do a real B2B job. We don't care that you have this, low level senior manager role at Costco. You need to prove you can sell something. So I'm like, okay. They said, you have Xerox paper, Cintas, or some type of uniforms company. Go prove you can sell B2B. And I humbled myself and said, okay, I'll take a step back. I went to UniFirst. They had a sales division in Detroit that was selling some of the medical supplies to the hospital, was cleaning supplies, and shopped in the towels and the uniforms for some of their disposable stuff. So I went and took that job and was like, okay, I'm going to go network this and figure out what it is to play in that space. And that quickly, yielded success, which opened up doors into a very quick pharmaceutical stint that ultimately led me to an associate level clinical specialist at Medtronic and cardiac. So I never was really fixated on what specialty I wanted to go in. It was just always, how could I figure out to achieve that next milestone in the journey of breaking into device sales? But then I was given this amazing opportunity at Medtronic to not only move into a clinical role, they had a spine rep sales role open in Detroit, where they had 5 reps in 6 years. They couldn't retain anyone. They couldn't get any traction in the account. And I was this entry level new leader new clinical specialist at Medtronic, and said, I'll tackle that. Put me there. Let me try that. And found a lot of success. And ultimately, with my partner and I, built a $10 million territory in 3 years from nothing. So we ended up becoming a very successful team. So I really took that mindset into every opportunity that I took there the rest of my career. And it was first 10 years, a little bit clueless about what I wanted to do. But the last 15 years I've spent in healthcare, I've never found a more deeper appreciation for helping patients. And when you have that opportunity to do that, I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because I feel like I can relate to a lot of what you just said, but also having interviewed like so many people, from like C-suite leaders to investors, this like common theme of like early in their careers, just whatever you're handed, you just make the most of it, and then seeing that as a stepping stone or a milestone to like the next thing, but like really owning that area. And I think that maybe it's part of the zeitgeist of where we're at as a society, whether it's people earlier in their career or even startups. There's this lack of patience to see things through and do things in steps, right? Like on the career side of things, it's obvious, like, young people in their career, they want to get promoted like yesterday, right? But if you look at it in the startup world, there's so many founders and even investors to an extent where they just want to do like a gazillion dollars in sales within the first year. And it's like, well, that's just not how anything really works. Sometimes it happens like that, but at least in our space, it's not. And then there's ways to unlock milestones and unlock next levels of the game that you grow. And I think like Insightec is a really great example of that, because I remember when Insightec first went commercial and how you guys progress in terms of doing a lot of clinical studies, doing the science the correct way, like rolling it out to KOLs and everything. I think there's some parallel there. Does that make sense?
It does. I think humility goes a long way at any level of anything you do. And I think when you realize that there's a progression involved in achieving whatever your goals are, and everyone has different levels of goals, right? Not everybody wants to be a CEO. Not everybody wants to be a manager even. A lot of people like to run a highly successful business in different capacities. And I think that's what makes this industry so intriguing, because you could live and provide and execute and have a very successful career in so many different roles of each organization within the med device, med tech world. I think though, one of my challenges breaking into, the strategics, away from the strategics into private equity, was they wondered like, hey, is this person gritty enough to lead in this more agile, less supportive environment with resources. He's worked at Medtronic, he's worked at GE. So a big part of, my narrative of breaking in with giving someone like Maurice confidence was sharing that scrappy background, that he understood that while, yes, you have some of those luxuries at the Medtronics, the GEs of tons of support, tons of staff, the foundation in which, my journey was built in leadership was well received by this team and this PE group that said, oh no, we think Jake's built for this. He can adjust in this environment and be very dynamic. So I think that really matters.
I think so too. And even so, we're talking about at the executive level for a very well-funded company. But even like in my world, being a small business owner, like for my team that we're growing, I was talking to my head of strategy and she was, we were going through like how we're going to hire people. And it first started off with like certain skill sets of like market development and everything. And then I kind of said like, we shouldn't hire for that because those skills are always going to have to adapt and change. And what's more important is that like, we need to hire based on intellectual capacity, right? And because if you hire people who are very smart and hardworking and have the right characters, then that skill gap can be narrowed, like or closed really, really quickly. And so like one of the people that we hired recently that on paper didn't make sense as a hire was like this guy was just like a ghostwriter, right? But in fact, when I interviewed him, I'm like, oh, this guy has all the core values we like to look for in a person. Super smart, very resourceful and everything. And lo and behold, we plug him in and 3 months later, the guy's like a rock star.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's so important when it comes to like your hiring decisions for that. Like do you think about it the same way when you're looking to, I think it's easy when you're hiring talent to just say, oh, like this person has a resume that just screams success, right? They President's Club winner, or they've done these things, etc. But how do you go about finding super talented people at an inflection point in their career? Like somebody, let's say, who's been a rep for a while, and this is going to be their first leadership role or manager role or something. What kind of things do you like to like use to guide you on making those decisions?
I love the question because I think that's one of the hidden arts of our industry right now that's often overlooked and missed. I think assessing someone's ceiling of potential is way different than seeing what they've accomplished on paper. And I think when you've had the ability to carry the bag at different levels of your career, you know what to really look for. You know what screams, oh, that was a individual success, a team success, or there was some factor or a contract one or something in that moment that really allowed the pathway to success to scream on paper. So you have to really know how to flush that. But I also look more at the individual, the characteristics of what is this person like on the team? What is the function that we would be looking them to lead within? And what's their motivation and purpose for why they want the opportunities? I think once you break down, when you see someone has the necessary capabilities and competencies to do a job, you really have to root into how does this impact the team dynamic? And how is this going to scale as we build this thing out? So I think really understanding the disposition aspect of hiring someone really matters. Like for a rep, for example, the hardest thing they do is transition, is take their old hat off and put their new hat on. So I really look for in interviews when there's somebody moving from an individual contributor into their first leadership role is, are they aware of that? Do they tackle that head on in an interview and share that they're aware that they're going to be moving into a role that's going to require a different set of ways to spend your time to coach and develop people versus I'm a rep, I do everything myself, I carry the bag because it lives and dies by me. Those are two different mentalities. Influencing 12 people or 20 people or 1,000 people is so much different than influencing, yourself who's running the territory. So I look for those types of EQ type dynamics from individuals when we interview them. I think that you have to find that sweet spot. Also, just because someone's been in industry a long time doesn't mean they're not still motivated. I think that's another piece. I've had the opportunity to hire close to 50 people my first 18 months at Insightec. I've made a lot of change and a lot of transition and been able to find a lot of leaders who've led in large capacities before that were just really hungry to do something more innovative in healthcare. And the Insightec opportunity really motivated them. So you really have to have, I think, a good understanding of what you're trying to build first to know how to place people and set up a team for success. You don't get every hire right. Nobody does. And anyone who tells you full of it, they're not honest with themselves.
I feel like that's one of the most common things that I hear that people don't realize, that I think everybody actually sucks at hiring and retaining, because there's so many variables in there. And I think it's just easier to say, hey, like you have a certain set of criteria that you go by and everything, but like you have to be very aware that like it may be the right person, but the wrong seat on the bus, wrong timing, etc.
Yeah.
Do you feel like some people, for let's say ego, or maybe, who knows what other biases there could be, hold on to a hire or keep somebody in a certain role longer than they should?
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest disservice to the rest of the organization and the team. Most leaders, one, they don't fire quick enough when the need to do so is there. And you shouldn't take that lightly. Letting go of people isn't fun. And anyone who likes to let go of people is probably not the right leader to have on your team. But you need a leader who's decisive, who knows when, and unfortunately to pull the Band-Aid fast. When you allow for that to go on, it doesn't just hurt the team, it also hurts that individual that otherwise needs to be set up for success for what they do next. So I think feedback's a gift if you provide it the right way, but being a decisive leader and making decisions quickly, especially in our world now where time is against you, you don't have a heavy cash balance, you have to perform month in, not month out, and you have the right team in place. So I think, balancing that need to move quickly and make those decisions really does matter. And I think people struggle to do that.
Yeah. When you're managing like a team, so like right now, you mentioned the size of the company and everything, so there's a lot of people. How do you... I think the other unspoken art, we had this conversation with our team at MarketCraft about attention, right? So like in marketing, the whole idea is, we need to get attention, but it's like, why attention? The metaphysical reality of it is that where focus is put and attention is put, that's where energy goes, right? And it's the same thing, I think, within an organization. So how do you make sure that you align people not only to achieve certain business results and objectives, but to make sure that their activities are tracking to those things, that your core values are also all in alignment, right? I feel like the best companies in the world, it's kind of like a magnet. When all the atoms are aligned in a magnet, that's what magnetizes it. And I think the best companies in the world, when they have really good alignment internally on their core values, the actions they're taking, the objectives, all these things, then that's where you have multi-billion-dollar companies. How do you do that?
Yeah, you have to be clear on your KPIs. I go back to that, really defining what the key objectives are for the team to go out there and solve, and holding not only yourself accountable, but your team accountable to those goals and objectives. And having the right operating mechanisms. I think a lot of companies over operate with calls and calls and calls that are really not as efficient as they need to be. And when I think you have the right KPIs in place and you have the right operating mechanisms in place, you're able to be really focused on the core problems and the things you're trying to solve, so you can have movement. Take massive actions on things, move quickly, don't let things get delayed in the decision tree, and keep the ball moving. So I think leaders that do that often tend to see better results because they have the ability to not only influence change quicker, they can be more agile and pivot when they need to if something's not going well. And I noticed that some of the larger companies, that was always a frustration of mine leading through those types of environments, is that a plan would be baked and it was in the operating plan for the year. And because we baked it at the beginning of the year, you had to stick to it. Even though 3 months in, you said, hey, this isn't going well. Why aren't we pivoting? We really need to do something different. So I think, leaders that have the ability to be more agile and decisive in those moments tend to be far more successful. The team is focused, they're motivated, and you really create this culture of ownership where the collective team is functioning as a unit. It's not one person carrying all the weight. Everyone is following through with what their sets of responsibilities are. And that's how you mentioned the magnet. This is how you really get a snowball effect and things just start moving quickly. Mm-hmm. That's been one of my guiding principles, is eliminate the noise and stay hyperly focused. And part of Insightec's journey has been exactly that. You mentioned it earlier about, research, and we were doing things in different portions of the body. And when Maurice brought the organization to become really focused in the brain and taking that next step in our evolution of a commercial organization, we now know where our priorities are. And I try to keep the organization relentlessly focused at executing on that. Because when you do that, you unlock all your other potential and the other value creation art.
I agree. And what's interesting, Jake, is that nothing that we just said, anyone would even argue with. And many people would even say, oh yeah, that just that's almost common sense. But to this day, let's just look at our industry. I'm going to take two really extreme examples. Amazon is $1 trillion company. They got there by the first, I don't know, maybe it was the first decade of their existence, where there's all we do is sell books. That's it. That's all. And we're going to just perfect that whole process of buying the books, the supply chain for books, all that stuff, right? In our industry, Intuitive was doing all these things. And they said, all we're doing is we're focused on radical prostatectomy. Don't care about anything else, right? And so like you have these like stories in business and there's multiple of them. But to this day, I still see so many companies just in our space where they're trying to be this like wandering generality. They're like something for everybody. And like their KPIs is just like all over the place. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of the time it's lack of clear vision at times and how to get there. I believe in a simple, stupid mindset. I preach this and I sometimes get chuckles. We'll have our board meeting and they're like, God, we love that you just lay it out, super straightforward and to the point. And I think that's how you need to operate. And I think when organizations start to focus, because if you really know what your core business is, you know what objectives need to get done and you go out and do them. It's when you get lost in the things that aren't having impact on where the final outcome is supposed to be for the organization is where you lose time, you waste money, you lose skill sets, you lose talent. And I think a lot of leaders like to put their stamp on things. And I think that's part of I mentioned the word humility earlier. I think when you can be humble that it's not always about putting your stamp on, it's about simplifying process and helping the team execute. Like that's your mark. That's the type of stamp you want to put when it comes to running an organization. And I think it's the same thing when you over-engineer a product. How many products do you see go out to the market and you think it's going to be this exciting launch and you put it in the physician's hand for the first time or it launches and they say, well, why did you do that? You should have done this. This is a complete mess. And you're like, we just dumped $500 million into this. How did we miss? And it's because we try to over-engineer, overcomplicate. So I think a lot of businesses struggle with that. I think when you can stay focused on the little things, like I said, stay out of the noise and do the 2 to 3 things right, and then you notch that off and you get to the next 2 to 3 things, the business becomes more clear and the whole team becomes more aligned.
I agree. I think there's like something to be said about that, about the value of really simplifying things to their core and like focusing an attention. I think it's the same thing. There's a guy who I know, he runs a, what exactly does he run? He's a trainer, but he's a very successful business guy. So he runs like all these clinics, like they do like peptides and stuff and blood work and everything. So he's in like phenomenal shape. And so I'm very big into biohacking and everything. And I was getting some advice from him on like just food to eat and everything. And he said something that I was like, oh, that's so applicable to business. Where he's like, yeah, he's like, for your food, like you should just like consider having like eat this and that like every day. And he's like, Omar, like just don't forget like simple scales. And he's talking about this for diet, right? And I was like, that's so applicable to like so many things in life, including business, which is you can't scale complex things like whether it's like Insightec or my business, like as you start to scale the organization, it's very difficult to scale something that has like super complicated processes and is all of these things, including like objectives. You just can't scale that. But I wonder if because if it's like your thing is keep things stupidly simple. Do you feel like the reason why most people don't do that is because it feels less sophisticated and sexy? Do you think that?
I was just going to say, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, people want that wow factor, that sexy factor. But think about what we're doing at Insightec. We're delivering acoustic energy in the brain and burning a hole to solve a neurological condition and tackling Parkinson's and essential tremor with movement disorders. There's nothing more sophisticated than doing that. So why overcomplicate all the process that goes into solving what we're trying to do? A more advanced system that's more precise, that delivers reproducible outcomes. And then you think about the operational end of how do we improve patient outcomes and safety? And then you have the government and the reimbursement policies that we need to go and think about. And then the economic value to match that so our consumers can buy it and treat these patients. It's a very sophisticated model. So if we can be humble in understanding what our business is, I don't think you need to over-engineer process. If you have the right people, you'll solve it. You just got to keep them focused and out of the noise and on the 3 to 5 things that move the needle every week. And when you do that, again, the traction comes into it. And I love the health piece that you talk about. I'm a big health guy. I do the light stim. I have the cold plunge. I have the red light.
Oh, dude, we were. Yeah. Now I know why. Like McNamara and Maurice, everyone was like, "Oh, you got to meet this guy." Oh, dude, we're gonna vibe. Yeah, all of that. And I think let's go like a little bit on the personal side of Jake Ghannam. Yeah. But like in your personal, like, how do you apply some of these principles in business to that? Because again, so one of my beliefs is that like there's no such thing as like work-life balance. There's going to be imbalance sometimes in your personal life or work life, etc. But it's like the same thing. So the way you operate in one thing is pretty much how you operate everything else. Like I don't see too many wildly successful business people who don't have some set of those values translating to their personal life.
Yeah, no, I'm proud of that. I've been married almost 19 years. I have a very simple, stupid life. I priority one is my family, to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to provide for my wife and children and hopefully leave a legacy for them of working hard and making an impact and using their time on this earth the right way. And that's really like our purpose as a family when we think about how we spend our time. And, I've always been driven to do something hopefully extraordinary in my career. And so like I keep it simple, but when I'm home, I'm with the kids.
What's something you do with your family on whether it's a daily or weekly thing that is like core to the Ghannam family?
Core to the Ghannam family is that when we are home, we are outdoors. So we get outside, we're playing baseball or softball. I have a daughter who is an incredible little softball player, and my son, who I think has got a lot of potential, is a lefty pitcher, turning 11 years old. And I know every dad says that when they see their kid throw a ball for the first time. But I like to take those moments to be outside, be present. We actually really try to get off tech in our house. When we're home as a family, we play Monopoly, we play cards. I think those things that are good for the kids, like euchre with the 10-year-old that can beat adults. And so we have a lot of fun from those perspectives. And we like to travel. I like to take them on new experiences whenever we can to get on out. But I think those things are really important, and just be super present. One of my famous things is I'm a Dunkin' Donuts dad. So my kids, every Saturday morning when I'm home, I get up 6 a.m. They wake up by 7:30. There's a Dunkin' Donut waiting for them in the kitchen with their little drink. And I've done that for the last decade, and it never goes away. And it's the best. It makes me, they still smile.
Little things like that. And as big into health as I am, like every now and then you need to leave a little room for some fun stuff. So my son like loves macarons for some reason. So like on Saturday, funny enough, same, but Saturdays we'll get that. I think what's interesting, you said something earlier, which is like making sure to be present. And I feel like that ties back to the theme that we're talking about, which is like the importance of attention and where you put it. And that's pretty much what being present is, to make sure that your attention is focused on right now. Because I feel like this is something I feel like it's so important for businesses, like for teams, but also individuals, which is if you really want to impact the future, your future, the only way you can do that is how you focus your attention right now in the present moment and the actions you take. That's it. And I feel like simple things like that, people, when they get it right, that's when seemingly impossible things start to happen.
It does feel that way. You become so much more productive in all facets of your life. And when you can mirror the personal success with the professional success, it's really exciting. I think a lot of people overlook that. They think, you have to have a failed personal life to be successful in business. And that is, I think, the furthest thing.
I think it's such a stupid narrative. I hate that narrative.
I hear it all the time, though. I see people that are further into their careers that have said, that's part of the process. And I honestly, that's been something that's stuck with me. I was very fortunate enough working for Jeff Martha as well at one time. And and I've been very fortunate too with some of the mentorship he's provided along the way. And I asked him that exact question probably a decade ago. I was like, hey, how do you find the balance doing what you're doing? This was before he succeeded Omar. And he's, Jake, that's a personal choice. There's sacrifices. You have to understand, like, the journey you're trying to go on requires, but if you're really intentional with your time, both in your personal and professional life, they work. So do that. And so great advice. It's always stuck with me. I've been fortunate enough to try to adopt that. And you also have to understand things are hard too, right? Life is hard. There's things that come up and you need to know how to balance that. So I think if you're built for handling life as it's thrown at you and you're agile, you can figure it out. So that's my thought process.
No, I completely agree. And it's funny, there's like I see social media like fire. It's like you can use it to cook your food or burn your house down. And so on Instagram, there's this handle called Dear Boy, and it's supposed to be like it's like not real, but these handwritten notes of a grandfather to his son about like life. And one of them, it said like, Dear boy, if you want massive success, do both of these things. Increase the sizes of your sacrifices, reduce your desires. And I'm like, yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, I think it being, we're similar in age, and, your kids are a little bit older than mine, but like, it's really tough to be like a great businessman / entrepreneur, good father, good husband, be in good shape, dress well. Like, all these things are really difficult to do. But I think that when you decide to choose where you focus and how you do it, like you can make it all work. And I think, like, I'm sure you go through seasons yourself as like an executive right now where There might be some weeks where it's like very heavy business, very little personal. There'll be other weeks where it's flipped, and you just have to be very good at the art of balancing that out and just know that there's like it's never going to be like complete like balance in between work and personal. It's just not how it works.
Not how it works. And especially if you're trying to push boundaries. And I think that's also an evolution. And just my core principles of raising my children are exactly that. Like, I also want them to see that sacrifice is necessary to achieve your goals, that it doesn't come easy. And, we try to model that in our house. And that's really important. By all means, you don't get it perfect every time. But, the fun thing for me is as my kids have gotten older and they've been on this journey with us, moving around the country for opportunities to tackle new responsibilities in my career, they are so aware of what it takes. The questions they have at 10 and 12 and turning 11 and 13, like the questions they have are incredible, and their understanding of what it takes to navigate the journey of, trying to become successful or try to have a successful career. It's exciting for me. So it's really rewarding to have that balance.
What you talked about this concept of like your kids. What's interesting is that with kids, and again, I try my best to get as much advice as I can from people who have raised children, have successful families, etc., which is you can say as many things as you want, but kids are really going to just do what they see you doing. So like I can talk about like health and fitness all day long. The only way this actually works is that my son, and soon my daughter, as she gets older, they literally see me like doing some form of physical fitness every single day, right? So for you, like in terms of how you exemplify that to your kids, like what did you see when you were growing up? Was it your mother, father, and uncle? Like what was it that you saw a lot of that had this imprint on you?
Honestly, it was the competitiveness of the siblings. We were all within a year plus in age.
You were the youngest of 5.
Youngest of 4 boys, and the 5th was the youngest, which was a girl.
Okay, got it.
So youngest of 4 boys. Yeah, so
youngest of 4 boys.
Oldest played baseball at University of Michigan. Second oldest is a retired Navy SEAL. Third oldest, football.
What's the age of difference between you and, let's say, the oldest?
6 years.
That's like a generation. That's like a massive difference when you're kids. So like when so when you were 6 years old, your oldest brother was 12 years old.
Correct. So
yeah, huge.
We were and they were all a grade apart in school. And the other one played football at University of Michigan. Was a part of there when Brady was there. So the other brothers were retired Navy SEAL. So like we had and my sister was probably the best athlete of all of us. But by the time she was asked to play college sports, she said, "I've seen enough of my brothers playing. I don't know if I want to keep playing." So it was funny to see that. But no, just the environment. I think, it was healthy competition. But we grew up in an environment that you just make the most of your potential. We were always told potential doesn't mean anything. It's what you do with it. And I think that's where some of my sports background comes in, of just wanting to always have a competitive nature about how I approach things, and a team first mentality, team before self, but go out and compete. So yeah, I've had the privilege of having that with my siblings, which was pretty cool.
Earlier in your career, I always wonder, I feel like when we grow up, both professionally and personally, a lot of who we are is based on some level of pain we experienced. And it doesn't mean like pain is bad, but I'm wondering, like in your career, what kind of painful lessons did you endure that like really made an impression on who you are today? And I'm seeing if something like a mentor or a boss or somebody told you something that was like painful, like through the heart painful, but like that changed you for the better.
Yeah. So I'd say my one, I feel bad saying my biggest mentor, but probably my largest mentor, her name is Brooke Story. She's a super seasoned executive in the industry at Becton Dickinson, was at Medtronic as a president for a while. I was a rep in Detroit, and I was very eager to move into my first leadership role. And
you were doing spine, right?
Yeah, I was doing spine. That's right, in Detroit. And she was our vice president at the time. And I approached it the wrong way it was the first time I think I came a little bit unhinged from a reality check moment of, hey, I was a hotshot rep, crushing it, top performing rep. I should just be handed an opportunity to take on the next step.
Out. I want you to go back. If you need to close your eyes, do it. But like, go back to that moment. Can you just talk us through specifically what happened? Because I feel like there's a good story here. I don't want the highlight. I want the detail. What did you say and do? What happened?
Yeah, so I was a sales rep in Detroit, and there was an opportunity to become a district manager out there. that, I put my name in the hat on and automatically received the automated message, you haven't been enrolled long enough to consider it. And me being, younger in my career, sitting in bed at night, decided to rattle off an email to the VP and say, hey, like, what the hell's wrong with this system? You need to know who I am. We should talk. And it was a very stupid email to send, but I sent it and I got a response back within minutes. And it was like, I'll be in Detroit tomorrow to see you. And literally, Brooke got on a plane. I'll never forget. We met outside Henry Ford in Detroit. We met at a restaurant called Traffic Jab and Snug. Never been there before. And we sat down and had lunch. And it was the first time we met face to face. And I had no idea, obviously, about her reach within the organization and how well received she was throughout the entire industry. I mean, largest acquisition ever with Covidian. She was a president on Jeff's staff and Omar's staff. So super highly regarded at that time. And she provided me that feedback. She's like, look, you could be the most talented person in the world, but rattling an email like that's going to cost you your career if you're not careful with it. Not with me, but somebody else who won't take the time to speak to you. And we ended up talking for like 6 hours. And right then and there, it was the most like, okay, you can't let this success of crushing it in one role get you to think that you're going to achieve what you need to. And ever since then, honestly, we probably 10 years later now, we talk every other month, personal, professional. She's probably one of my dearest friends now and somebody I highly respect and probably one of the best leaders I've ever worked for in my career. But not hearing that at that time would have really, really set me back big time. And it was a gut check to go recheck myself. So it's funny, that opportunity led to her promoting me 4 months later to tackle an opportunity in Chicago where that's a whole nother story of a mass exodus of every rep quit within 90 days and went to Globus and Nuvasive during that time. She gave me the toughest job to go solve, but also the toughest feedback. And it was a blessing. Best thing that could have ever happened to me at that point in my career.
What did all that teach you though? What was the, talk about like your own operating system and everything. Like what was the operating system update that got baked into like core Jake Ghannam from all of that?
Yeah, I use this in every bit of my being today is the internal pause. And she told me that was her word. You need to use this internal pause. You're moving at a very fast pace. You have a set of skills. Yes, you see things quickly, but you need to move at the right rate and find this internal pause. So when you feel like you're looking to, make a change or make a decision, and it applies to anything, not just an email in that moment, but like, hey, we have to make this big hiring decision. We have to make this big organizational decision. We have to make it, something that's wildly impactful. Find the internal pause and really rethink and look and make sure you're grounded in your decision. And I've done that very well since then. And that's been honestly like a secret weapon of mine. And I share that with people I now mentor because I see it and I'm like, oh, that was me 10 years ago. I'm so glad I have a chance to help someone and share that same thing. So the internal pause, game changer.
You mind if we go on a little side quest for a second on that?
Yeah.
Side quest. Because I think it's very fascinating. There's almost a spiritual religious underlying to what you just told me. And I'm not talking about like Christianity or God or anything, but hear me out on this, okay? So you're a young rep, and would you agree that a lot of what you were being driven by at the time was like pure ego? Yeah?
Money, responsibility, providing for young children at that time, becoming a new father was a huge, hey, my kids were in diapers. I'm like just getting into my first home, working 100% commission job. So there was the life stresses that definitely overlapped at that time. Okay. And then hey, I think I've achieved, and some ego came in. Hey, I'm further along than I really am.
Got it. Okay. So there's this dichotomy between ego and intuition, where you need ego, but it oftentimes leads us down the wrong path. Ego wants like title, more money, it wants details, all these different things, right? And it's usually a masculine entity, right? Not male, female, masculine. Like women have masculine aspects of their personality, men have feminine aspects, right? The feminine side, which is intuition, is like very subtle, right? It gives you a nudge, like you want to do something, but there's something in you where it's very subtle. It's like, you shouldn't do that, right? And most people don't listen to the intuitive side, right? And you mentioned how she talks about this internal pause, which is an intuition thing. And so in a very interesting way, there's this manifestation of ego at that time, which was you, and you're a guy, you're masculine, everything. Her being a woman, feminine, there's this intuition side. Having this meeting and discussing this, it's like really interesting. And now you embody that. And that's probably what I think, in my opinion, probably unlocked you as a leader, because you had the ego and masculine qualities that are needed, like in terms of competitiveness, all these things, right? But to unlock to the next level as a leader, you need that balance of intuition and feminine, right? It's like very deep. Like most of the audience is probably not even tracking along on what I'm saying, but there's something very deep there. And I think it's very interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah. And I think I can honestly say, looking back on it, it was the most pivotal point in my career. And I've never grown to respect somebody more for helping me, shape the future direction of how I think about how I carry myself and in that moment. So, and again, you could look at a snapshot in time and label someone forever, or you could do exactly what she did. Said, hey, I want to come sit down and talk with you because this isn't translating right. So let's sit down and have that discussion. And she's a killer. She's just one of the best leaders I've ever worked for.
Yeah. And so like, even with her, like I feel like the best leaders, they have a holistic balance of ego and intuition, masculine and feminine, competitive versus this versus that, and know when to turn it on at the right times. There's times where you have to turn on very aggressive energy, ego-driven energy to like hit a goal and everything. And there's other times where it's going to be like, hey, we're going to be a little bit more intuitive about this. We're going to hire this person on paper, doesn't check off all the boxes we want that the ego wants, but intuitively, like there's something there. I feel like I think like it's a unspoken, it's this unspoken thing about being a leader that like, there's no like playbook on how you get there. It's like more on like your experience in life and are you able to mature as you grow older and like incorporate these things that you might be missing as an individual.
I love that. No, I think that's right. That's one of the things that I pride myself on is how do you stay true to who you are, but pick up skill sets that have obviously yielded tons of success for others and find a way to adopt your own autonomy around who you are and how you lead. Is I think you have to be yourself, but self-reflection really matters, like for self-development and the willingness to look within. And I think those types of moments are just so impactful. And I try to do that for others. And I think great leaders out there know how to do that. And even better leaders know how to apply it. And I think that's the really important part to know.
Now in your current phase, your current, like the level that you're at as a leader and everything, what are some of the things that you feel that you are currently trying to strengthen and get better about? That maybe stepping into this role where, again, you have so many people reporting directly to you and you're not and this is my personal opinion, if you took your role right now where you are in Insightec and you take the exact same thing, the same number of people, impact and everything, but you put it in a strategic, it's not the same. And the reason why I say this is that where you're at right now, the decisions have much higher stakes associated to them, and the outcomes and the result of a good or bad decision it ends up being realized very, very quickly. You can make a bunch of bad mistakes at a strategic level, and like you're not going to make a dent, and it's like whatever. That's that's a whole other conversation. But at your stage, the outcomes of the decisions you make now, small and big, are way more acute, way more intense, right? So like what kind of things are you personally right now going through or you're sort of developing where you're like, oh, that's a part of my professional operating system I need to like improve on. I need to either recruit somebody to be my partner in helping me with that, or you kind of understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think for me, part of the reason why I joined Insightec was because I was very aware of what my gaps were. Having an opportunity to lead in a global capacity, and then having the opportunity to learn from somebody like Maurice and be in that environment on a daily basis. And like I said, the Fred Moles, the Omar Ishraqs, having a chance to tap into leaders like that and having a really strong ELT team to partner with. So for me, I was very aware that I understood commercialization very well. I'd never led a CMO function. I hadn't led clinical affairs. And some of the international markets were new to me. Knew a little bit about Europe, but didn't have a heavy stake in China and the rest of the Southeast Asia markets and really how they operate and how they function. So really had to step into that and very aware of what those gaps are, because you're right. You're very exposed in this environment. Mm-hmm. One wrong mistake is catastrophic. And in this world that we're in, where you don't have, billions of dollars on a balance sheet that can protect you, and some other product that's out there, when you're a singular focused product, you don't have any other exits or, levers to pull when you make a mistake. So for me, honestly, that was the most exciting part about taking this opportunity, kind of a little bit how I'm wired. I've always been wired to take things that I think others might think are a stretch and prove to myself that they're not a stretch, but also build the right foundation and skills to go develop where they're at. So for me, the big thing was I didn't have a strong presence in China and Japan and setting up that region of the world. It was become highly inquisitive, spent tons of hours when no one's really watching or pay attention to what I'm doing at night.
I saw your roadshow over there from on LinkedIn, that you traveled there, you're doing, I noticed that. I was like, oh, wow.
So thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was a personal decision where I said, hey, I'm going to go immerse myself in the market, not learn from afar. I was on a plane every other week somewhere different in the world, not just taking photos and, putting it on LinkedIn, but using it as an opportunity to speak with physicians, speak with different regulatory bodies, speak with patients, and really understand in our sales organizations, and just meet and network in those environments to build those skill sets while leveraging the network I've built the last 15 years of really big leaders that have done this before. So it was a really great way to accelerate the curve that I knew was there for me that would be something to struggle with. And I can tell you, 18 months in, I'm so glad I made that choice. But it had trade-offs, right? There's other pieces of the business that you would have to go back in that were a little bit not as given as much support the last 18 months while building this. So that's been a part of the journey. I think the other piece is too, you really have to, anyone who says they're 100% ready for every role is not. I don't think you can ever look at someone and say, hey, they're not ready for the role because they don't have this experience. I mean, how else do you get the experience unless someone's willing to give it to you? And for me, that was one of the best parts about the interview process with Maurice and the board at Insightec was they said, hey, that came up exactly. Jake hasn't led in, the Asia Pacific markets before. And the feedback was, no, we think he'll figure it out. He's somebody that can adapt and figure it out if he puts in the work. So challenge accepted, still a lot to prove. Results will obviously determine if we've done the right work. But I think that part's important. There's always something to learn at every role. By all means, do I have this thing 100% figured out? No. I think there's a lot still to uncover, but the things I do know that we are implementing are definitely yielding wild success, and we're on the right path for sure.
Yeah, and this is also why I was really excited to talk to you and also have you on the show again. Like, I look at MedTech like a lot of people look at sports and stuff, and so like for you, you're at a very important company that's growing, and in a very important role. But even to add more to that storyline. Is that on your board, apologies to the rest of the board members if I don't mention you, but like on your board, you have Fred Moll, which I don't need to tell people who that is. You have Maurice Ferre, and you have Omar Ishrak, the former, CEO of Medtronic. So like that's three of many people on your board that you're essentially not only managing expectations with, but you are essentially going back to this sort of metaphysical thing, is that you are the physical embodiment of this like leader that's sort of driving the organization forward. And then you're essentially channeling the experience, the guidance, and everything from these really iconic figures in our industry who have their own perspectives and biases of like what success looks like and how do you move towards that. How do you make the most of a board like that to make sure that you translate that into the rest of the organization? Because in a way, you're kind of like this, not filter, but almost like you're a channel to take all this great guidance, feedback, etc. from the board, and then channeling it and dispersing it through the rest of the organization as you align people to sort of march towards those goals.
Yeah, so I think one, having a board like this it's exciting. It's all in perspective because the board's role is to be strategic in how they engage and provide input and guidance and offer suggestions and also help you see things that might be watch outs. But ultimately, the board leaves it in your hand to make the decision. So while they're watching to see how you receive the feedback, and obviously a board like this, it's very easy to be exposed based on the level of skill sets and success that's in that room. So for me, it's been a very awesome opportunity to engage with leaders like this. But I go back to what I say about Maurice, and I mean this. Him and I have become, I think, pretty dear friends in this process. But it's not just a kudos to him; it's his willingness to engage and teach as well as allow me to have the runway to go make decisions for the organization. And I think that's the most encouraging part about being in a board like this and working with leaders that have achieved what they have. They could easily come in and grab the reins and say, hey, this is what we're doing. And they don't do that. They say, hey, put your stamp on it. What do you see? How do you want to operate? We're behind you. Go. And that's such an empowering thing to get right for the rest of your teammates. And they're that way with the rest of the ELT. Our CFO is incredible. Our COO has been around for 26 years. So like, we have a really, really great team in place that I think we work well together, and it's fun to be in this environment. But it's definitely not lost on me, the audience. Again, that was a huge reason to, like, when do you get an opportunity like this in your career to say, yeah, I'm going to go run this incredible organization with this unbelievable product that has this potential that could be, who knows what it could be. I don't want to get it. It could be massive, and it will be. But to do it under Maurice's stewardship and a board like this is, you don't get any better experience to grow as a leader.
Yeah, and I'm personally, I mean, for the industry, I'm excited about that. And I'll tell you why is that historically in our industry, we are, and there's a reason for this. We were very founder unfriendly and very new experience unfriendly. And what I mean by that is, in the past, when, let's say, a company was getting funded, a lot of times, and this still happens, is they get rid of the founder and they get somebody else who's just done it multiple times as a CEO, because there was a certain playbook that you ran and it worked, right? And then with more established companies like an Insightec, it's like, oh, instead of like a Jake, let's get XYZ person who did this 2 or 3 times and they did it for 30 years. And I think the problem with that today is that the experience ossifies over time versus bringing somebody in who has the energy, number one, and the hyper awareness. So like, you coming into this role, you're much more hyper aware because you literally have no biases. This is the first time you're running a role like this. And so you're going to be immersing yourself in those markets immediately versus, and again, this is just my perspective, had somebody come in who, let's say, had quote unquote that experience, they're not going to get on a flight and go to those markets. It's like, oh yeah, I know those markets, blah, blah, I don't have to do it. And then that leaves so many different opportunities untouched. And then more importantly, biases that get baked in. And now the business has risks that it's unaware of. And it will be aware of it later on when those risks can't be undone. And so that's why I'm like, I get personally I get excited, and I'm very hopeful for our industry when I see things like this happening, where this is where I think it makes a lot of sense, which is you have extremely seasoned people like Maurice, like Fred, like Omar on boards, and then new leaders like you assuming these positions where you have not only your own experience, but your own biases and filters on how things should be done. Because we've sort of entered a new age of like med tech and med devices. It's not the old age anymore. And I think a lot of the industry has not transitioned out of that. Again, this is why like when I talk on my show and there's certain companies that I always like mention offhand and people are like, oh, you have this, you really like Insightec or XYZ companies, you always mention them. Like, yeah, because there are like a handful of companies that I think are the new generation of med tech.
Yeah, no, and I think I think that's right. I think running the same play is what ends up creating staleity in the market, and you can't become stale. And I think right now, we're one of the few companies in the space we're in right now. Top line revenues over 100 million and growing at the rate we are. Like, this is the most critical time for us to get it right. There will be, some type of event that, yields what Insightec's long-term success is. And it's going to come from how well and how efficient we operate right now. There's really no room for error at this point. So the board and the team that we're assembling, and we are a team that's, like, I'm fortunate enough to get to lead in this role, but it's not lost on me at all what's required of, all 500 people at Insightec to make sure that we are, executing at a high clip here to make sure we produce what we're expected to. So expectations are high as well. So it's not just a nicety to go in a different direction. We have to perform. And I think that's the sense of urgency that we're putting around the organization, which is exciting.
I love it, man. And I know we're getting close to time and you have to go in a little bit, but real quick, just like a rapid fire question. I'm just curious, but like for you, like in your like personal and professional development, were there any podcasts could be one, books that had a profound impact on like how you operate?
Honestly, I listen to podcasts. I read as frequent as I can, but most of the most impactful things have come from my mentorship discussions. I have a circle of 3 to 4 mentors that I talk to on a monthly basis that are all former CEOs, current presidents of large publicly traded med device companies. And we talk for hours, and we have this every month. And I found that to be one of the most safest environments to share, as I've built relationships with these people to say, hey, I'm not seeing this clearly. I'm not understanding this, or, being able to come in that environment and really allow for the vulnerability to show up and what your gaps are and what you're not seeing at times in the market has been the best development I could have ever done. So I really try hard to surround myself with those 3 to 4 people on a monthly basis. And any, free moment I have, we have those calls, and they're lengthy and they're exciting. And that's been what's provided me, I think, the best lenses from real world experience from people that I really admire and respect, and that also know have my best interest at heart when we're talking. They're trying to help me see around things I don't typically would have had exposure to.
I love that. I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's one thing that a lot of leaders should think about doing, which is like having their own like board, right? Board of directors that sort of provide guidance and feedback. So that's awesome. Jake, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to see you at LSI USA. For those who are listening, obviously Jake's really active on LinkedIn, so give him a follow. And then as always, if you enjoyed this episode, forward this on to an investor or another professional in the industry, and be sure to give us a subscribe and 5 stars. As always, I'm Omar Khateeb, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who would really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.